Your Legislators is made possible in part by the generous financial support of MAPE members, making Minnesota clean waters, safe communities, quality education, and veterans care happen. We work hard for Minnesotans. Live from St. Paul, Minnesota, we welcome you to another season of Your Legislators, a roundtable discussion featuring state lawmakers who are prepared to answer your questions and discuss important issues affecting citizens of Minnesota. Now, here's your moderator for tonight's program, Barry Anderson.
Good evening and welcome to this week's version of Your Legislators. We're delighted that you have joined us on this pleasant Thursday evening, and we hope to have a terrific hour of conversation about the issues that face the Minnesota legislature and the people of the state of Minnesota. This program is Your Legislators, and it gets its catchy name because we want to hear from you. And so we invite you to call in your questions. Send them to us via email. We have a Twitter connection. All those instructions will appear on your screen. Lots of different ways to communicate with us, but the point is we want to hear from you. So get your questions to our panel, and we'll see that our panel has a chance to answer those and sort of unravel the mysteries of St. Paul. And as we begin that process each week, we do this week, as we do every week, we give our guests an opportunity to introduce themselves to you. So let's begin. Just so happens that tonight we have an experienced and veteran panel. All of our guests have been with us in the past, but nonetheless, we're going to ask them to say a few words about their background and what brings them here. Joining us from District 17, Clara City, Senator Lyle Conan. Senator, I think the last time you were with us, you were a lowly representative, right? And now you're a senator? Is that how that works? Or I probably insulted or annoyed somebody, I suppose, by saying that. Tell our viewers a little bit about the changes in your life and committees you're serving on and what you're doing when you're not here.
Okay, well, good. Well, most of my life before the legislature, I was a dairy farmer, so that's the background I come from. I represent Senate District 17, which includes Candy, Ojai, Swift, Chippewa, and most of Renville counties. The committee assignments I have for this year are taxes, the Tax Reform Committee, Jobs, Ag, Rural Development, and Environment and Energy. And so those are my committee assignments. The Ag Committee, it's been about, I think it's been 5 or 6 years since I last served on the Ag Committee, so I was happy to get that assignment. And the Environment Committee, it's actually been, I think, 10 years since I've served on that. So it's, I'm kind of glad to get that assignment, too, to get back into working with some of those issues.
And Senator, maybe you could share with our viewers, the length of your legislative service, when you were first elected, those kinds of things.
I was first elected back in 2002 and took office in the House of Representatives in 2003 and served there until April of last year, at which time I ran in the special election to complete the late Senator Kubley's term. And so I've been in the Senate then since April last year. And I think it's kind of interesting that now after being elected in November, I'm considered a second termer in the Senate, even though I haven't even been there a year.
Yeah, you got to run twice in 1 year. So,
well, actually I had 4 elections because both elections had primaries too. So I had 4 elections last year.
Well, we're delighted that you could join us. And of course, you mentioned Senator Kubley. It's probably appropriate to say that we miss him here too. He was a frequent guest on our program for many, many years, and his wise counsel was always appreciated. Also joining us as another frequent guest from the Alexandria area. Your district has changed a little bit, as I recall. Senator Engebretson, introduce yourself to our
Thank you so
viewers.
much for having me. Yes, I represent District 8 now, which is the old district was 11. My district changed an awful lot. I actually lost the majority of my district. I am only representing 8 townships that I had previously. Now all of Otter Tail County, except for 3 townships in the very northeast part. So I have Fergus Falls, Perham, Battle Lake, Alexandria, the main part of Douglas County I still have. So mine actually got a little smaller. My district got a little smaller, but it's basically west central Minnesota. Of course, Otter Tail County having 1,049 lakes. It was a good fit for me. I come from Douglas County, of course, and there's a lot of lakes there. So my previous history, of course, was law enforcement, where I served 34 years, the last 16 as the elected sheriff of Douglas County, and came here in the Senate in 2007, and Been 4 years starting then in the minority. The last 2 years we were in the majority, and now again back into the minority. So I've had a wealth of experience when it comes to both sides of being in the minority and the majority. So I'm looking forward to this session, having a good time.
You know, we were talking a little bit before the program began about who might have the largest Senate district. I think Senator Westrom must have 8 counties.
I think he does.
And that might not even be the biggest one. I don't know. Does anybody know what the biggest Senate district is? It's got to be a contender,
I would
I
almost
would
think it probably is. He has 8 counties, not totally, but it's a new district. That is one of the new districts we have. And yes, he's neighboring to me to the south, west, and a little bit east, so, or a little bit, yeah, mostly west.
We do have some Senate districts in Minnesota that are larger than some states.
That's
so.
right. That's right.
That's true. All right, another frequent guest from Ghent, District 16A, Representative Chris Wazinski. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Wazinski, yes.
Yeah, I'm working on this. You know, give me enough decades and I'll get it right.
right.
So tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Well, I live out near Marshall, Minnesota, which is the largest town. Actually, the town I live close to is Ghent, and not a lot of people know Ghent, so we say Marshall when you're out from rural towns, rural areas. But Nordland Township is where we call home. I farm with my wife Jessica and 3 young daughters, have a small welding business. Ran for the first time in 2010 in House District 21A, which was Redwood County, Lyon County, but with redistricting. That changed quite a bit as well. We added 2 new counties to the district, Lac-Parle, Yellow Medicine County, along the Minnesota River, and on the west side, sandwiched between the Minnesota River and the South Dakota border. Have a good chunk of Lyon County, a little sliver Redwood County, and a real strong agricultural area, a lot of outdoors, a lot of good things happen out there.
And you have the city of Marshall as well?
Yep, have the city of Marshall, Schwann's Ice Cream, Ralco Nutrition, a lot of
Southwest
good businesses.
State?
Southwest State.
All right.
You bet. I serve on the Commerce Committee, Capital Investments, and Higher Education Committee. So
We'll talk a little higher education before we're done tonight, because that's a question that viewers have had a lot of questions about. But let's begin with an issue that we've had some questions about. Panels haven't been perhaps as deep in this area as we have this week. Start with you, Senator Egerbrensen. Let's talk a little bit about the DNR. We've had some viewers with concerns about DNR enforcement and whether or not there might be some more oversight. But more generally, what kind of legislation might we see in the DNR area over the course of the next couple of months? And let's have a little conversation about that.
Sure. You should know that last year I did chair the Environmental Natural Resource on the Senate side, and we got into a lot of enforcement issues with the DNR. And I'm assuming that the questions are probably coming from the most recent invasive species enforcement, if you will. I'm just guessing, Judge, that's probably where they're coming from.
That's a piece of it, yes.
Yes, and there was talk about, of course, having stops, like we did years ago with DUIs and stuff in law enforcement. And so there was a lot of talk about the power of the legislature giving the power of the enforcement agency, the DNR conservation officers, and that again is on the table. Actually, I just came from the subcommittee that Senator Schmidt is now chairing, representing the Dark House Association with some spearing opportunities, and there was some talk there as well about the enforcing, and that certainly is an issue. And our approach, I think, should be as legislators is an educational piece there that I think the conservation officers should be more focused on instead of enforcement. Give them that warning. Clean your boats out, clean your live wells out, and things like that. First time around, and the second time around, then I guess you have to somehow get their attention, and a fine or a sanction of some kind, I think, is the way that we have to approach it. So, but there's a balance. There really is. Does it have to happen the first time? Probably not. But the COs have that opportunity to be able to give out a warning if they like, and sometimes that works.
Senator Cornyn, your thoughts on this?
Well, in Candioi County, the lakes area there, the aquatic invasive species is a big concern up in that area. And, the
Green Lake, Spicer.
Yes, that
exactly.
whole area,
Yes.
right, yeah. And, the discussion is of what to do to control the aquatic invasive species. And, I don't think there is one clear answer to that. You talk about enforcement, and then how available do you make the boat washes, so to try and take care of that, to clean them up before they go in the lake, and all of that costs money, of course. Not just, up front, the cost of building the washes, but also to have the manpower to to run the thing, because it's not like a car wash where you can just run in and do it on your own. This is pretty high pressure and pretty high temperatures, from what I understand. And so the debate in Candy, Ohio goes on what we need to do about this. I also think that in the long range now, to look at how to handle this problem, that I think research is important too, to learn about each of the species, and then so that we spend taxpayers' money the most effectively, that has the best control or possible eradication.
Representative, your thoughts on
Well,
this?
it's, I think looking at partnerships as well, I think, kind of representing the southwest portion of the state, we found opportunities to work with the equivalent of the DNR in Iowa, because we've got the Des Moines River watershed that comes up through the southwest portion of the state. And, those are taking advantage of those situations, trying to be agile as we can, and being open as we can, and really looking, these are new situations that we're dealing with. And, it's finding best practices across the country, working with research institutions, U of M, trying to give them some charter, looking at I think there's some great opportunity to partner with higher ed and look to those things to try to find some reality and fixes to this issue.
Yeah, and the enforcement part is really a social change, if you will, because everybody who hunts and fishes really, that's their outing, that's their ability to go out there, and the attitude sometimes is we can bend the rules a little bit out there, and that's got to change, and it really has, and enforcing those laws when you're out there dealing with the people that are spending money on their vacations and going out to the lakes. It's not an easy thing to do. It really isn't. But when you get their attention, if that doesn't work with a warning, then enforcement has to happen.
It's interesting. We had just had a question from a viewer in rural Douglas County, and I'm not sure that it's clear what this viewer is discussing specifically, but since it's kind of your territory, I'll pick on you, Senator Ingebrigtsen. And the viewer says, the DNR has too much authority. Is the legislature going to make any changes to keep the DNR in check? I'm not exactly certain what he or she is pointing at, but my guess is you might have some clue.
Well, I think that's just exactly what the issue is. And we had a lot of discussion, as the other members here remember last year, about giving the DNR that authority. They've also always had the authority to make an arrest, a conservation officer, but it has to be reasonable. And I made it very clear when I was chair of the committee, when we passed these enforcement laws, that if they get carried away, if it gets out of line, we will revisit that in the legislature, and I meant that. So if we're getting those kinds of complaints, they need to come to us as legislators, and we need to hear that, and we need to hear good, legitimate complaints. And there's always two sides to every story, coming from that field myself. So I will check on that, and if it looks like they've been called Gestapo and everything else. If that's going on out there, then we definitely have to change something.
Well, I just, kind of in addition to that, just talking about the DNR and things I've heard from constituents, is just dealing with, some of the moves we made last session is opening up some state land to grazing, so dealing with the Cattlemen's Association and looking at management and enforcement of just state lands. And, I think whenever there's new things, obviously there's going to be some apprehension to see, going overboard, are we doing too much? And, I think just that same conversation needs to happen, across the board, and really trying to move, I think that's the legislature's job, is to give some direction and try to work with the folks, because they have serious concerns, but I think we really need to represent what we do and do it well. So.
The DNR land, the Minnesotans feel that's their land, and it really is. But we've, as the legislature and the governor, charged the DNR to take care of that land. And I know that I'm very aware that there's some feeling that the DNR kind of takes on a life of its own, and you get to be difficult to deal with. But the DNR has a lot of different responsibilities. I forget how many divisions are in the DNR. There's quite an array of work that they need to do, and so. I even sense from people back home that they feel there's a difference between divisions on how easy they are to work with. But again, I think it's depending upon the job that the particular division has to do.
Well, we'll leave that topic for the moment. If the viewer's got some specific issues that we should be addressing, we'll be happy to take those up. But let's move on to higher education, which was touched on here a minute ago. I'm going to turn to you, Representative Swedzinski, because you serve on that committee. Let's talk a little bit about what you think might happen this session. I know the Representative Pawlowski has expressed some concern about Minsky. Is it Pawlowski's expressed some concerns about Minsky management and administration, if I've got that right? And I suspect that's probably an issue for your committee. What do you see happening this session? Let's move. Let's start with that topic.
Well, you know, I think Representative Pawlowski, Chair of the Higher Ed Committee in the House, you know, his main concern right now, we've been really going page by page through the U of M's budget, through Minskew's budget, and really trying to just understand. There's a lot of new members on the committee. I'm one of the more rural, I have a rural district. I have Southwest State. I've got two technical schools in my district. And a lot of this is stemming from an article that was out, a newspaper out east,
Wall Street Journal, I think,
Wall Street
right?
Journal,
Yeah, that's right.
talked a lot about administrators. And, you know, when we're talking about boots on the ground, people in the face of students, administrators by, default are always accused of, well, you guys aren't necessarily teaching, you're not right in front of the student. You know, why are you taking up such a large portion of the budget? And so really trying to get down to the brass tacks of, what role do administrators play in higher education? How is that affecting the cost to students? Because when you go through, we made some cutbacks and paring down when it came to the higher ed budget. But you look at the rate of increase when it comes to tuition, the rate of decrease in state support, those numbers don't add up directly. And so there's different numbers and where those dollars are being spent and really just trying to get a good handle on it from the state level because we have a lot of young people and they're graduating with debt. Luckily we have about a third of students graduating without any debt, and then it works its way up to almost all the tuition to some in between of what they had to go ahead and borrow. And I think at the end of the day, we want to graduate people, and at the end of their graduation, they have as little debt as possible. But most importantly, they have a job. And I think that's, that fine balance that we have as legislators, because that's one of the highest groups of people we have in the state with the highest amount of unemployment. The ability to gain a degree, but at the end of the day, is there going to be a job waiting for that person when they graduate? And those are tough answers to find, and after keep them in keep them in our areas of the state. Nothing's worse than having and graduating with some people, and they look around and that nice piece of paper they have in their hand, they can't find a job for it for the next 150 miles. Well, when you got Lyon County and you've got Yellow Medicine County, Lac La Prairie County that have seen decreases in population of 10, 15% over the last few years, those are real concerns to have because we don't want to graduate people and they're gone. We want to have people come and stay.
We had the state demographer on last year as a guest, and he made the comment that we have over 20 counties in Minnesota that have fewer people living in them today than lived there in 1900, 113 years ago. And many of them are along the South Dakota border, some along the Iowa border, and kind of interesting. Senator Coonan, your thoughts on the higher education piece?
Well, I think, that for all of us, the focus is the student themselves, so they get the best education possible and hopefully leaving without a lot of debt. And so as we look, and I'm not on the committee, I should make that clear, but eventually all these bills get to the floor. But I think as the legislature goes through and studies the budget and decides what it's going to do for funding, and hopefully we can find more money for a little more funding. But it's also very important that funding be used wisely, and so that the best advantages possible ends up with students. And, I know that's not a simple job for Minsky or the university because they have to balance all these things, and they also need to keep the quality of education up while still trying to control costs, so there's a real challenge there for them. The question of how much money goes into administration, I think that's something, too, that needs to be looked at because we want the emphasis should be the students. And so we need to look at all those things and make sure that it is proper for whatever the Minsky or university, whatever we're talking about.
Senator?
Yeah, the higher ed thing is, and at least in my area, there's been a lot of concern, and that's why I'm following up with some legislation with regards to the technical skills, getting back to the 2-year technical, where I graduated from some years ago, to the technical, quite a few years ago actually. Technical
You don't have to tell us how many. That's okay. You get a
from
pass
Alexandria, which is actually in my district, and now Fergus Falls. But that's where we're really hurting. We went through this higher education time, I think, in our history where we had to have a 4-year degree in order to have a good job, and not so much anymore. Not so much anymore.
In fact, I think Alexandria,
machinists.
not to interrupt you, but Alexandria, if I'm not mistaken, had a law enforcement degree or law enforcement program that was really among the best anywhere.
And it still is, I might add.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Well, there you go. Well, I have to work with a number of those officers in a variety of capacities.
It really
so.
truly is. And getting back to the technical expertise coming out. I mean, we've got machinists they're looking for now, and we've got a class of 35 in Alexandria that's been filled up and waiting list to get in, and they're graduating with $40,000 to $45,000 a year jobs. They're very highly technical, and we have to get back focused on that because those 4-year degrees isn't necessarily the way to go. So we're finding that, but I know the governor's budget is like asking for 8% increase. I'm not sure where that's going to eventually end up and when higher ed. I'm not on that committee as well, but like Lyle said, we will be seeing it on the floor. So 8% seems to be the number right now, at least moving forward, and I'm not sure that that's the right way, especially when we have this question of administration, and I think that has to be ironed out.
We have a viewer who wants to talk about a topic we have not visited about this year, and it's become somewhat interesting. It's been some developments, and that's this question of sand mining as it relates to the fracking process and whether or not there might be a statewide moratorium. What about this viewer is in the St. Croix River Valley and is concerned about that whole process and wants to know what the legislature is likely to deal with, likely to do there as to either potentially a moratorium or licensing or studies, other things that might take place. Who wants to take a run at that?
Well, I could jump in a little bit. I wouldn't consider myself an expert when it comes to frac sand mining, but we've had a lot of conversations. This was going on. Last session we dealt with really the issue of local control when it comes to townships and the ability to open up meetings and whether there were going to be a local moratorium or not. And so what we're seeing is a lot of counties, a lot of townships are choosing to go ahead and move forward with mining operations in the southeast. What works for some doesn't work for others. There's others that don't like it, others that want it. And so the conversation last year was, let's make sure that we have it as local of a control as possible. And now that there is things going on, we're seeing more conversation. Well, we need a statewide moratorium. Well, this is pretty big zigs and zags. What do we want? Do we want local control, or do we want, the state walking in and making big decisions for an industry that, quite frankly, is booming? My district itself depends heavily in certain sectors on what's going on in North Dakota. I've got housing manufacturers that are booming, that are hiring people in January and December when normally they've laid people off because they're shipping housing up to North Dakota. And
where they're engaging in frac mining,
where
the sand that comes out of Minnesota is necessary for that fracking process.
It's an integral
Just so our
part.
viewers understand what's going on.
Yeah, it's an integral part of that economy, and it's reflecting in our districts. I'm sure if you look into all of our districts, we've seen manufacturing. Granite Falls has a manufacturer that is shipping things, a lot of steel work being done, welding jobs being created right here in Granite Falls in my district that's being shipped up to North Dakota. So, the reason why the Ford plant sits where it sits is because of the sand, the silica sand that was there, because old Ford made his old glass. And so this is not a new conversation. We've used this sand before, our sand pits, and so we need to take into consideration the needs and wants of the locals, but we also need to look at the economy as a whole. And yeah.
Senator Conan, your thoughts on that?
Well, we heard a bill on the subject in the Environment Committee just a few days ago. And there was a lot of discussion, well, testimony first, and then discussion. And the subject of a moratorium on that subject, I'm always a little nervous about using those. But after listening to the testimony and even from local elected officials, although they're not unanimous on this, but a great many of them wanted a moratorium, and I think a lot of them were looking for a 2-year or longer moratorium. What happened in the committee is we put a 1-year moratorium on it, and there's going to be a state study, but it has to be done then in that year, at least according to this bill, because the silica sand that we have in Minnesota is some of the best in the world. I mean, it's really sought after. And so there's concern about would we lose business opportunity. Well, I think a year from now, the sand will still be there, the demand will still be there. The concern, however, though, is if people have started investing to gear up, that is always a concern. So we held the moratorium to a year, and with the instructions to get the study done in that time, and then we made an effort also to protect local control, so counties and townships and cities in some cases can make the decisions locally on what they want that to look like in that area.
So did that bill pass out of committee?
It passed out of committee. It's got a ways to go yet. Yeah. And I don't know what's happened with the bill. In fact, come to think of it, I'm not even sure there is a bill in the House yet. Yeah.
Senator
It's
Ingebrigtsen?
not real clear to me what the environmentalists are after here, quite frankly. And we do studies all the time, and we find those people wanting us to stop this and to stop that, and not just nilly-willy. Don't get me wrong, but we've been dealing with this non-ferrous mining thing now for about 5 to 6 years. Representative Rukavina would always remind us of that when he was here on this show, and now it's been 5 to 6 years, $45 million later, and we still haven't turned a kernel of sand. Maybe it's time that we start saying, if you can't come up with environmental hazards as to why we're going to have a moratorium on business like this that's been going on for many years, maybe they should pay for it instead of the taxpayers. It's got to stop someplace. And I'm not convinced that this kind of mining is really hazardous to us. Now, it's damaging the roads a little bit. They're hauling here and there, but that's business. I mean, they expect to have to pay for that. But if you're going to throw a roadblock in front of frack sand mining because of the oil situation, or you're against coal, or you're against polluting the environment, there's going to have to come a time pretty soon that the taxpayer can't continue to put these commissions together and pay for that. And I'm not convinced that we should stop it at all. So.
That's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up about stopping the silica sand mining because you don't like oil drilling. I mean, I don't think the two should be connected.
No,
and so I completely agree with that. What I didn't mention earlier, though, is that it looks like there actually is a health risk with silica sand if you inhale the dust. And so that's kind of another reason. I never knew that before, but
Yeah.
And so there's some of those things you just thought maybe we should look at, and the mining up north too. That's been in the works for a long time, and in my opinion, I hope that gets going. But I should add that if everything falls into place like it looks like it will now, that silica sand mining will jump ahead of mining up north. So.
We have a viewer from Alexandria who wants to know, we've actually had this question from a couple of different viewers over the last couple of weeks, and I think this is pointed at trails, because this viewer wants to know, why is there so much money being spent on grading and paving railroad beds rather than highways, which we all use and could use the paving, et cetera? So it's one of those priority questions, I guess. Anybody want to take a run at this? Trails versus highways?
Well, Peter came from Alexandria. I'll give it a shot. Legacy funding has been around since 2008. That was, whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, 3/8 of 1% of our sales tax went into what's called the legacy funding. And so more opportunities for trails and parks come from that. In fact, 1/3 of it that I'm involved with, the Lesage Sam's Outdoor Heritage, 1/3 of that now is actually bringing in $100 million a year. That just tells you that the economy is starting to come up, because when I first came here 6 years ago, it was $57 million, 57 or 59. So the war goes on. We're doing parks and trails, and we should be doing highways. I get that, but the caller needs to understand, and the viewers need to understand, that those legacy funds were voted in 2008. I've made it very clear that I actually didn't vote for it because it was a tax increase, but I think it was overwhelming. It was like 62 or 64% of the Minnesotans said, we want money to go to our parks, trails, hunting and fishing opportunities, as well as arts and humanities. Now, whether you like that or not, it is part of the Constitution, and it behooves us as legislators to make sure that it is spent where the Constitution says, not like what happened to some of the lottery money some years ago. So.
Well, I think when it comes to trails, it's this is one of my first experiences in the legislature was one of the biggest issues, not necessarily Republican or Democrat, but rural versus metro.
Sure.
And the division of, where those dollars, because of the constitutional amendment, where they're being spent, whether they be spent in Alexandria or Lyon County or Lincoln County or, over in Chippewa County, or up in the Twin Cities. And so, as rural members, if you're going to spend the money, and it's constitutionally dedicated, putting it on a shelf and just not spending it is not an option because you're asked to do that and represent your districts. And so that's one of the reasons you probably saw something being done in Alexandria is because we worked as rural legislators to stand together and really say, in the prior years, it had really been slanted to be spent in the metro area.
That's right.
And we kind of stood together as House Republicans and House Democrats and state senators, Republicans and Democrats, to get it in the rural areas. One of the questions I remember back in the day talking about this was federal funding, too, when it comes to trails. And I remember James Oberstar used to be a congressman up in northeastern Minnesota, had more money in his district for trails than the second congressional had in it for roads. And so, there's some of that going on, too, where you can push it out from the Fed side, too. But, as a state, we're really just working at rural versus metro. And, so.
Any thoughts on that?
Well, in the comparison of roads and trails, I think that roads definitely take the priority for economic development.
And they need some work.
Right.
Oh, you bet.
But as these two gentlemen have stated, it is a separate funding stream. And so, as you mentioned, Chris, that if that funding stream is there, that rural Minnesota should get its share of that.
The interesting thing about this question, and I don't take a side on this one way or the other, is that when we were just debating the constitutional amendment, whether to pass this, one of the arguments against it is it limits your flexibility in terms of dollars for other purposes. One of the arguments for, of course, is it allows you, the voters, to prioritize. You can argue, you can come down either side on that question, but this is one of the side effects of it, is that you may have what some people perceive as imbalances. Now, I will say, as someone from McLeod County, that I think spending all the trail dollars on the loose line trail is a really good idea. So, not that any of us have any biases on this.
They just need to understand it's the Constitution that we really have to enforce here. And I think so far we've done a pretty good job of doing that over the last 4 years. 21 more years to go. That's what the voters' will was, and that's a constitutional amendment. Do we pick and choose which ones we want to honor? I don't think so. We have to abide by it. So.
Well, to tie two issues together, kind of this issue talking about trails and legacy money and Lessard Sands money, looking at our toward heritage. When we're talking a little about invasive species, and I think that's an area that we should definitely look at where. If nothing is passing something on in the better shape than it was, using heritage money potentially has
protecting. Yes.
I think that argument can be had.
That's right. And we did spend a lot of money on that last year.
A viewer from Bacchus wants us to talk about an issue that was much discussed a couple of years ago. We haven't heard much about it lately, but this is the question about the one remaining state nursery and whether or not there will be any legislation or changes about that issue, and what about limitations on private use and so forth. Anybody want to take a run at that question? Excuse me.
Actually, that was my bill. We had two nurseries in the state of Minnesota that were, and one was operating in the red, and we addressed that last year with our budget crunch, and we tried to do as best we could to minimize that particular area and try and sell off some of the equipment, and we thought it would be better if the private sector had an opportunity at those reforestation projects. They'd never had before because the DNR had these two nurseries. So we tried our best to work through that process. Now with control of the different control of the legislature, that might come back. I would still like to see the private sector get an opportunity at those nursery opportunities.
So there were two nurseries, now there's state nurseries, now there's one.
There's one, plus I think the other one is still somewhat operational, but it was in the process of, we were in the process of shutting it down because it was operating in the red.
Any other thoughts on the state nursery question? If not, we'll move on. I'm going to ask you, Senator Engebretson, because this is a law enforcement question. A viewer from Duluth is concerned about the synthetic drug ban. This viewer notes that the viewer doesn't believe it's working. I don't want to get into the specifics of some incident that she cites, but she wants to know whether or not the legislature is going to do something on this issue. Can you talk a little bit about the synthetic drug ban?
Yeah, I can. That's where it actually originated. I think the legislation last year was out of Duluth, where they had a shop there where they were selling that synthetic drugs. And quite frankly, we need to do, I mean, it just seems like You know, you got that attitude out there that we keep fighting the war on drugs, we're not winning, so let's legalize it all and let's draw some revenue off of it. Quite frankly, no, we have to go to battle every day if that's the case. And our kids are subjected to so much now. And we don't, you know, we really need to be diligent about that. And the synthetic marijuana is very dangerous. I mean, the legislature did, I think, a tremendous job some years ago, before my time, when I was still, you know, out on the beat, of dealing with the meth issue. And the meth, you know, they did a great job with that. And so it seems like when one thing gets taken care of when it comes to drugs, whether it be marijuana or synthetic drugs or meth, here comes something else. So we have to be diligent. We have to stay after that. We should absolutely make it illegal and just get rid of it. And
Have you heard, this viewer apparently feels that there are some concerns about whether or not the law as passed was effective and whether or not it needs to be tweaked. Have you heard anything about that?
Well, I think early on they had the synthetic drug bill, but it was very specific. I think it dealt with some, it got down to the chemical level of how the drug was manufactured and the makeup of it, and it was almost the issue we came back, I think, about in the second part of the session and addressed it because it was too focused. So all the manufacturers had to do was change a few of the different ingredients and kind of got around and skirted around the law and made it legal again to sell. And so I think that's kind of, we've tried to make some adjustments.
Ingredients is about that.
Yeah, and so just try to expand it to be a little more general, a little more broad, because, I mean, you read in the news, I think there was a man down in Miami-Dade or something that was, I mean, he did some just wacko stuff. So, I mean, it's dangerous stuff.
Yeah, and we move ahead with alcohol, still our biggest problem. I mean, it still is. It just really is. We still have, that's socially accepted, but it's there. I don't think this legislature is going to do away with it. But these illegal drugs, these illegal street drugs that are very dangerous, they're unknown. Our kids and our grandkids don't know what they are. We need to do due diligence and train our best to keep them off the streets.
Senator, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just agree with both these gentlemen have said that it's one of those things that's ongoing. There's always changes along the way, and so it's kind of a cat and mouse game almost. But we just need to stay.
Do you think there will likely be some further changes in this session? I think that's what this viewer is concerned about.
I haven't heard that. I'm no longer on the Judiciary Committee, but if somebody were to bring something forward to combat it, I certainly would be the first one to sign on.
All right. Viewer from that famous Minnesota community, Unidentified City, wants us to talk about property tax. This viewer's note that there's a property tax reform committee working to simplify taxes and perhaps having just 4 main groups of property taxes. There's also a question about a homestead credit, but let's start with the property tax reform issue first. That's a little straightforward. What's likely to happen in this session? Senator Conan, let's start with you.
Well, the caller is right. There definitely needs to be work done. I think in Minnesota we have over 50 different property classifications. And if you go back, and I lose my history, but I think back in the 30s there were just 4, and so over time they've
I wasn't around then.
Yeah, I wasn't either, but I can barely remember. But that's a very good point. But what we find in committee is as soon as you start reducing the classification, and then by doing that somebody's property falls into a classification might have a little higher rate, that you start to get pushback. And so that's what happens every time you try and do tax reform, if it's property tax or, the basic, what they call tax principles of broaden the base and lower the rate. We're looking at that in sales tax now. And any time you try and do this, there will be winners and losers, at least relative to the way the tax system is set now, and so you'll always get pushback. So if we're going to be looking at really broad tax reform, I don't think it's going to happen this year, because to get the budget done and to do the tax reform all in the same year, I just don't think it'll happen. If we're looking at a little smaller, more minor changes in tax reform, then it is possible that something could happen this year. Now, with property tax, too, we've been talking about, well, man, get down to 4, that's quite an undertaking, but maybe we can go from 50-some to 30 or something like that. And we'll be looking at those proposals over the next few weeks and see where they end up. But I'm going to speak as a tax committee member now on my own opinion on some of this, that as the committee goes through and looks at tax reform, I think we need to be real careful so that tax reform and new revenue don't get blurred together, so there's a definite difference. So I would like to see each tax reform proposal be revenue neutral as a whole. I know that within that change there are winners and losers, but I just think that's important to try and keep it as clean as possible so that for transparency's sake, everybody knows if we're talking about reform or new revenue.
I think one of the areas I'd really like to move forward is the statewide business property tax. We're talking about jobs, we're talking about the economy, we're talking about the ability to compete in not only a regional economy but an international economy. I think those are some things that the state definitely has an ability to look at. And we made quite a bit of different changes with the homestead credit last year and some different programs. But kind of looking from a business standpoint, trying to grow jobs, especially on our rural areas. I think that's a small step that maybe we can take a look at. There's a lot of reform that needs to happen. And sometimes the answer is sometimes throwing just more money at the situation. But really digging down to the basics and analyzing what the changes have and what they've made for a difference when it comes to liabilities. And I agree with Senator Coonan that we have one of the more complex property tax divisions when it comes to just all the different titles out there. I know South Dakota I think is in the 8 range. So there's maybe some movement there we can make, but it is extremely complicated.
Property taxes, any thoughts?
Eddie.
Do you have a solution to this?
Yeah. No, but I think you're hearing exactly how convoluted our tax system is in Minnesota, and I'm so glad that there's a tax reform committee. I just hope we get something meaningful done. We have an awful lot on our plate. I'm gonna go out on the limb a little bit here, and nothing. I mean, we have jobs and we have tax reform. The economy's starting to come back, and now we're talking about social issues such as same-sex marriage, and we're talking about guns now. And quite frankly, we should be setting that stuff aside, and we should be dealing with these things. And Senator Coonan's right when we talk about how convoluted it is and how, when you talk about revenue neutral, I'd love to see revenue neutral tax proposal, but that's not what's on the table. There's a $2.2 billion increase on the table, and I think he's also right. That isn't going to happen at the end of the day. It just isn't. I mean, that's way too much that the public can handle here when we talk about coming out of a recession. At least I hope so. But there will be some tax increases, and I just hope they're not hard enough or harsh enough on our business and our folks in Minnesota. So this coming out of the recession that we're seeing now after the forecast today, it was a good forecast again. We're getting more revenue coming in. I just hope it doesn't damper that down. That's the way I'd like to see us proceed.
On that subject of property tax relief, Representative Sosinski's right that we should be looking at the statewide business property tax, and one of the reasons for that is because that's a direct state tax, which we have the most control over. You can try and use other mechanisms to control taxes, but that one is the most direct, so it would have the most immediate impact. And so and I think there's a pretty good bipartisan support to look at that too. I don't know if the caller had something there about property tax relief for homeowners too. The governor's proposal has a lot of money in that, and we're going to, in the tax committee, we're going to be looking at that over the next few weeks now. Is the governor's approach the right approach? We don't know that yet, but I do think that it's good that there's a recognition that property taxes have been, high, and we need to address that. So in the committee, we're going to look at the proposals and spend several weeks at it so we get a good look at them, and then in the end of the day, hopefully come up with something that has the what would you say, the best bang for the buck as far as delivering property tax relief.
Judge, too, what Senator Conan is talking about is the $1.4 billion proposal the governor has on the table. That's $500 rebate per year per household property, but that's going to come with a price tag. That's going to cost money. Make no mistake about it. It's not going to be free, and it's also going to be federally taxed. So we have to move cautiously, especially when the tax fairness bill he talks about is going to cost each individual. We're thinking about $347 per family member on sales tax. Now, that figure gets thrown around. I don't know how accurate that is. If that's the case, we're really not giving anybody a rebate when they're having to pay those kind of new sales tax. So we really need to move cautiously.
Viewer from Randall, Minnesota wants to know how the panel feels about the proposals that have been floating around for a new minimum wage. Of course, there's a federal proposal that the president has made, but I think there's been some discussion at the state level as well. Who wants to take a run at that? Senator Cronin, we'll start with you.
Okay, I'll start. It's, in my opinion, something will happen there, that there will be some increase in minimum wage. My own personal beliefs on that is I hope we go easy and don't, push it up too far too fast. I understand that there are families that, a couple will have maybe 2 or 3, maybe even 4 part-time jobs at minimum wage and trying to make a living, and I know that would be tough, or is tough. That's not much money in this day and age. But then on the other hand, in the rural area, a lot of our small businesses are also living, what the money they have available for family living is kind of limited too. So I think I think something will happen, but we need to be careful to find the proper amount, not overshoot.
Minimum wage?
Yeah, I think the senator's right. I think something is going to happen. I'm certainly not in favor of it. I'm not in favor of telling any business how much they got to pay their employees, quite frankly. And these are starter wages. These are, and if they're working 4 jobs to make ends meet, more power to them. But I think we're talking about a very small part of our community, that high school kids. And I had business in my office today, and they said, be careful with minimum wage because it's escalator. There's an escalator to bring it up over $10 an hour, I understand now. And if that's the case, then the people that were paying $14 and $15 an hour, they're going to expect an increase as well. Never put that into my equation, but that makes sense. So if we're going to give the minimum folks that kind of a boost, the ones that have been there that we've been paying that are loyal are going to expect some kind of an increase as well. Not saying that they shouldn't, but and it's not an automatic inflator for that, but that's how business usually operates and how employees operate. And so I guess I'm not in favor of it. I think business should have that opportunity to be able to do whatever they like.
Well, I kind of agree. I really look at the minimum wage when we're talking about finances and family finance. The biggest issue I hear is they don't buy as much as they used to. And the issue is money velocity, and this is an issue that we're having that overreaches what state policy can do. It's really issues that are happening at the federal government. When I first ran for office, 42 cents of every dollar that was being spent at the federal level was being printed. Now it's 46 cents and so every dollar that's being printed, if you've got a piece of paper, a Xerox machine, well, that's exactly what's happening. So the dollars that people are earning are buying less. And so whether that's $4 gasoline, whether that's be a 75-cent can of tuna, those are big issues. And some of the proposals out there are even talking about so if you're affected by this increase in minimum wage and you're a business owner, you're not allowed to fire any employees. So essentially, they're trying to make it harder to, you make it harder to fire, you're going to make it a lot harder to hire. And if you're unemployed, you'd rather have a job than not. Yeah. And, you look at France, you look at their high unemployment rates, you look at Spain, you look at their high employment rates, and a lot of those same policies are directly mirroring a lot of the proposals we're looking at here in St. Paul. And I feel it's going in the wrong direction. I do feel that there will be some movement. I agree with Senator Coonan that, if there is going to be some movement, I hope it's slight. But, we're dealing with a lot bigger issues here than just, policies and state policies here in Minnesota.
And we can brag about a 5.5% unemployment rate, which is 2% better than the federal rate here in Minnesota. So some of these issues sometimes that they bring up, that are brought up are I'm not saying we should not go for lower than that. I think we were at 4.7 or something when the economy was going good, but we're doing quite well in Minnesota.
A viewer from Crosby wants to know, we're back to DNR issues. Where do the legislature stand on bear traps, on the hunter side or the dog owner side? And
bear traps. Conibear.
Right, exactly. Okay. Tell our viewers a little bit about what that is. I'm going to pick on you.
Okay, you're going to pick on me again with the DNR issues.
Right.
Last year,
you're the closest thing we have to an expert here. So,
well, expert I will never pretend to be, but we did get involved in it last year. I think it was the first piece of trapping legislation that came forward for quite some time because there was some tragedies. Some dogs had stuck their heads into these traps, and we were out for walks and things like that. you know, you have to be compassionate in the legislature. You have to understand.
And tell our viewers, these traps, they're somewhat different than the standard leg trap, right?
Well, they are. They kill. I mean, they are killer traps. And if your animal gets caught in them, they're basically dead. Or, you know, unless you can be exactly right there at a certain time. So what we've done is, you know, they enclose around the neck of the dog, and that's what the issue is dogs. But there again, in the legislature, you have to find a balance. Some legislators wanted those traps off the ground so the dogs couldn't get into them. They wanted them protected, the trappers to protect them so they couldn't stick their heads into these traps. But there came a compromise last year which I thought was a very good compromise. But like everything else now, you know, they want more restrictions. So where that's going to go, I'm not sure. But we did I thought some pretty good work last year, bringing both the animal, you know, the folks that had their dogs lost, and I gave them plenty of time on the committee to talk about that, and we're very sympathetic. I mean, I've had a dog in my life around my family all my life, and to lose something like my best friend in a trap, I mean, my hunting friend in a trap is tragic. But you also got to consider that, you know, sometimes. You know, when they're out on public property like that, and people are able to trap, and fur bears, trapping is a pretty big industry in Minnesota. You have to have control of that animal as well, so you have to find a balance there. I think we did a pretty good job. I would like to see it go the way it is for a couple of years before we address it again.
Any other thoughts on that? How about you? Okay, very good. Viewer from Glenwood wants to talk about what does the panel think about the legislature? Let me try this correctly here. Viewer from Glenwood wants to ask the panel, what do you think the legislature will pass this session on the general subject of gun control? And I should say we have several other questions from viewers. Some of them have very strong views on both sides of this question. But in general, I think the issue is, what do you think is likely to pass? Where does the panel stand on these questions? Should we start with you, Representative? We haven't.
Certainly. You know, I'm hopeful that there is no, you know, assault weapons ban or standard magazine bans that are enacted. You know, I'm really working. I think there's some common ground that we can find. Maybe some stuff with better enforcement with straw buyers, looking at other issues with keeping firearms out of the possession of criminals, those sorts of things. But, you know, I think, you know, there's a lot of big, you know, this conversation is not just within our borders, but it's national as well. And, you know, Second Amendment is an extremely important part of our way of life, self-protection and shooting sports. And it's my goal and that nothing happens to negatively impact that. So.
Well, you know, being a sheriff, I issued permits to carry. That was one of my functions as a sheriff, and over the 16 years that I issued, literally hundreds of permits. And I think there's a lot of sheriffs who would say this to this day, that law-abiding citizens who can possess a gun don't get into trouble. I mean, I just never had a conviction rate of anybody, never had one instance of them doing that. So this gun debate should not even be going on. I understand Sandy Hook. I get that. I can't fathom somebody doing what they did there. But nevertheless, that's going to happen. It's still going to happen. You're going to have evil things happen in this world, and to restrict the rightful owners of guns in our country is something we should not be looking at. I can go on and on and on about different scenarios where the shotgun that we carry in the field is as dangerous or more dangerous than assault weapons. I mean, they just simply are with the right round in them. I mean, with double-aught buckshot. So I know guns. I know them very well. I'm an avid Second Amendment protector, and I really think we shouldn't be wasting our time in the state legislature and, quite frankly, at the federal level as well.
Senator, any thoughts on this?
Well, I agree with both of these gentlemen that, first of all, we should be dealing with the priorities of the session, which is the budget. And, you know, I personally wish we wouldn't spend so much time on it. But to, you know, the tragedy at Sandy Hook, that's, you know, part of what pushed this all to the attention. I think it's important for everybody to remember that school is still probably the safest place for your kids to be. Now, I do think there is some things we can do there with the school's safety fund to allow them to use them for, if it's window replacement or something with doors, and I think that should be a local decision. But
Teachers carrying?
that's
out there.
Well, it's up to the superintendents.
and that's being talked
The
about.
school
And
board should have that option,
Yep.
and it's something that's scary to people. It really is. Should an employee at the school have an opportunity to stop a threat like in Sandy Hook, if they would have had an opportunity not just to verbalize, but to actual stop. And yes, unfortunately, that would be to shoot somebody, to shoot the assailant. 15, for instance, if they'd have killed only 5 of the 20 kids, 15 of those parents would have went home that night, tucking them in instead of having funeral arrangements. So it's really hard to argue with that. It really is. But that's not the issue. It's the operator, and we need to deal with the operator. Mental ill issues, and we need to get them in the database. They should not be in. But where do you draw that line, too? I know there's those folks out there that say, who's mentally ill here? And there is mechanisms in place now, and we just need to do a better job.
Our panel, I don't mean to interrupt you, Senator, could you do anything else on that? Or?
Well, to that subject of, who's mentally ill, that's a really interesting subject to be talking about, I think. But when you talk about the mentally ill, a lot of times they're the victims, so we need to be careful with with that area, too.
Very quickly, we've got about a minute left. Viewer from Appleton wants to know about the new bridge in the Mississippi River that's been talked about, at least by some, as a toll bridge. What does the panel think about that? This viewer thinks, let's have a toll bridge. Let people who use it pay the cost. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
It's the first I've heard of it. I would certainly look at that, as far as a revenue opportunity, but I don't want to hinder commerce going back and forth either. So
about 30 seconds. It's a tough question to answer in that brief period of time. Viking Stadium funding. There's talk about the gambling not being sufficient. Any legislation moving on that question? Anybody have any thoughts on that in our limited time available?
I think they decided to push back their bond sale a couple of months.
To August, right.
To August.
Right.
I think, I don't, we'll see. I guess it's...
Local bars and restaurants are going to have still more time to get online with the electronics. I think that's kind of the feeling out there. And it's something new. I think it's something that will come, and I think you will see the funding eventually.
And it's also important to remember now there's a second vendor that's been certified, too, so I think...
That may make a difference. Yeah. All right. I want to thank our panel for joining us this week. It's been a great opportunity to discuss the issues that face citizens in Minnesota. I want to invite you, the viewer, to be back with us next week and each of the Thursdays that follow until the legislature goes home. And one of these weeks, we'll start talking about when we think that might be.
Home. Good idea.
See, there
Great
you go.
idea.
So thank you all for joining us. We'll see you all next week.
Late
Good night.
April. Late April.
There's much more about your legislators online at pioneer.org. Find out more about the history of the program, who's been a guest, and watch all our past episodes. There's also a photo gallery, informative links, and much more. You can also get involved and stay in touch by following us on Twitter and join the discussion on our Facebook page. Thank you for watching Your Legislators. Your Legislators is made possible in part by the generous financial support of MAPE members, making Minnesota clean waters, safe communities, quality education, and veterans care happen. We work hard for Minnesotans.